are so excited to have you join us for this very insightful and impactful event. Before we jump into our panel discussion, I'd like to share a little bit of what the Iowa Women's Leadership Network does by providing a brief overview. Our network of Hawkeye alumni exists to engage, enrich, and inspire lifelong growth and sense of community around all ages, disciplines, and generation of Hawkeye alumni. Through social, educational, and service-based initiatives and programs, we continue to share our time, talent, and resources through online programming and community events. So tonight, we are here to do just that, share our ideas and empower women who engage in the complex, often controversial, but ever so necessary world of politics. A couple of housekeeping items for our Zoom panelists and participants. First, video and mics will be turned off during the webinar. However, we do encourage questions and answers. Feel free to use the chat. We welcome questions to be submitted for Mary, Carolyn, and Megan throughout the event. So feel free to put them in the chat box, or there will be time afterward to engage in a Q&A session. This event is being recorded, and also closed captioning is available. You will find that at the bottom of your screen. It is now my distinct honor to turn the meeting over to our vivacious and dynamic Vice President, Christian Farrell, who will introduce our amazing panelists, and let's get the conversation started. Christian.
I even clicked the button and I still was muted. Thank you, Gina. It's a pleasure to be with you all this evening and to jump into our panel discussion. We have three inspiring women here to share their journeys with government, advocacy, lobbying, and so much more. I am humbled to be sharing the floor with these amazing women. We've created 3 sections to tonight's panel discussion to spark conversation. The 3 sections include celebrating the journeys of our panelists in the world of politics, navigating a male-dominated industry, and how women can support each other throughout our journeys. One quick reminder, please feel free to continue to use that Q&A chat section to ask questions throughout the discussion. We'll be compiling those questions to ask all of our panelists at the end. So let's meet our panelists. We have Megan Lehman. She received a fellowship in Washington, D.C. in 2015 with Running Start, an organization that trains and encourages women to run for office. She served a joint internship in the office of Joni Ernst and represented the U.S. at the Global Women's Leadership Forum in Iceland. We have Mary Kramer. Mary Kramer served as the president of the Iowa Senate from 1996 to 2003 and was nominated by President George W. Bush to serve as the U.S. ambassador to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean from 2003 to 2007. She also served on the board of directors for the State Legislative Leaders Foundation and was the chairman of the board for the Senate President's Forum. And lastly, we have Carolyn Green. She has built a career in the energy and environmental industries, traversing the public and private sectors and working with policymakers across the political spectrum. In 2019, she co-authored The Energy Within Us, which describes the experiences of Black women executives in the energy industry. Now I'd like to turn it over to our panelists and dive into our conversation. Can you each tell us a little bit more about your life journey and what empowered you to join the world of politics? Carolyn, do you want to start off first?
As soon as I finally get unmuted. I am an Iowa native, by the way, a 3rd generation Iowan. And my family was always involved in the community. So community involvement and public policy is just kind of part of my DNA. I call myself a policy wonk. And through policy issues, that's really how I came to the political sphere. I grew up being taken with my mother to meetings of National Council of Christians and Jews, League of Women Voters, naturally church things. I was involved in student government. I was pretty active in lots of organizations at Iowa, including being part of a group that chartered a sorority on campus, a Black sorority on campus. So activism has always been my thing. And for me, politics is about issues. It's about what affects people. So whether you are an elected official or an appointed official or a lobbyist, what brings you there is concern about an issue. And that really is my bread and butter, I think.
Thank you, Carolyn. It's so nice to have you here with us tonight. Mary, how about you?
Thank you, everybody, and welcome to all those out there in the Zoom land, I guess we should say. I am a longtime Iowan, but I spent my first life as a musician, and my second life as an educator, and my third life as a business executive. And then we got to politics. And I got engaged in politics because two women who were elected officials came to my door on a Saturday morning to encourage me to run for office. Something that I had not considered doing, and even then I was not sure that was a good thing. But bottom line, I wound up running for office in 1990 and served in the Iowa legislature till I left for the Caribbean in 2003. And in the midst of that, I became the Senate president. And I immediately on winning my first election realized how important, how even necessary it is to have more female voices in the work of the legislature and the policy work in all of those things, and that we actually can talk to each other and encourage legitimate discussion. And so I think it is incredibly important that women get engaged in the game. It isn't always fun, and it is not always where you want to be in the public eye. Sometimes you say, was I in the same room as that person? But it is still such an important thing. So one of my goals always is to encourage women to think about, how can I serve in this way? Is public service. That's what we need.
Thank you, Mary. And last but not least, Megan.
I'm going to echo a lot of what Carolyn said. I grew up watching my parents as excellent examples of leadership, but leadership through service. So I was an extremely active kid. I was in student organizations for as long as I can remember, leadership councils. I was that ambitious busybody for forever. But for me, it was always about service and improving the lives of others. And I decided a long time ago, I was going to be that person who didn't sit and complain and do nothing. I was going to stand, complain, and do something and be part of the solution rather than sit and be stuck in the negative and be stuck in the problem. So I got more engaged in politics when I was studying at Iowa and writing my thesis, which was based in political communication. And that's when I found the Running Start organization. And when I received my fellowship and really got proactive and started, and now here I am.
Thank you all again for joining us tonight. One question to all of you, and we'll go back around to Carolyn to start this one off. From your experiences, what is one life lesson you learned navigating the world of politics?
There is no such thing as a permanent enemy. Someone who is your quote enemy or is on the opposite side today may well be on the same side you are on the next issue. So it does not pay to burn bridges.
Amen.
Mary, how about you? What's one life lesson you've learned navigating the world of politics?
The importance of listening. You really, unless you're willing to spend the time to plumb the depths of what the person is thinking about, you cannot build the bridge to communication. And that's not only true in politics, but it is especially true in politics, that we understand where the person is standing. What is it they're thinking about, rather than just waiting our turn to talk. We really need to listen to the message that's coming toward us.
Yes, as the saying goes, Mary, how you stand depends on where you sit.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree and echo what you both said and add to it, to listen with an open heart as well as an open mind, because we have to recognize that no matter what political party we quote unquote align ourselves with, we're not the only ones on the planet, and we serve to serve everyone, not just the people who agree with us or who say they agree with us. And so that's part of being in politics, is finding a way to compromise with all.
And, you know, it's interesting because I think that women tend to be better at compromising because from an early age, we're taught to, quote, make nice. While that in some ways sounds negative, it means that we find a way for everyone to feel that they've won something as a result of the interaction, where being competitive means that somebody has to win and someone has to lose. In politics, if someone always loses, that means you've got an enemy, and you've got and that person becomes really dangerous. So making sure that we bring those listening and compromising skills to the table as women is really important.
It is, and the notion that we, I know I have very strong opinions about issues and positions. I'm sure all of you do too. But, and you don't have to scratch very far to have me tell you what those are. But the point that I want to make is that other people have those very strong opinions too, and they are equally entitled to their opinion. And so if I expect to have my opinion respected, then I have to be respectful of their right to hold that opinion as well. And I think we lose that. We tend to say, well, how could you ever believe that? How could you ever think that? And lose respect for the position that our person is holding. And that we lose ground immediately when that happens.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this conversation leads us right into that next section on how to navigate a male-dominated industry. And Megan, I have a question for you. During your fellowship with Running Start, what encouraging messages did you share with women who are interested in running for office?
It's a great question, and it's things that I still share today. So I'm glad you asked. The encouraging messages, or maybe pieces of advice that I would say, is to know your why and to be bold.
Yes.
So, for example, I just started a new job with Kirkwood Community College as the work-based learning coordinator, which is just about getting students involved with real life before they actually get into college. I help set up career opportunities for them, job shadows, internships, and it's a lot of negotiating with business leaders and professionals. And they can tell me no, that they don't want students to do this, but they rarely do. And it's because I'm really good at selling my why, because I'm really passionate about being an advocate for equitable education. And that's what a lot of Running Start taught me, was how to sell myself, how to sell my mission and how to get people as passionate about it as me. I could get on my soapbox right now, but I'm not going to because we don't have time for that. But you can find me later and join me on my soapbox if you'd like. Another piece of advice is to just be bold, because you never know what you can get if you don't ask. Something that everybody's uncomfortable with right away is networking. It's uncomfortable. You don't know people and it's just weird. But the sooner you can get comfortable with being uncomfortable, the easier the rest of your life gets, whether it's in politics or not. I was a part of a speech competition in Washington in 2018, and part of the contest was walking around with DC bigwigs and introducing yourself and putting yourself in their face, essentially. And that put this, I'm originally from Illinois, it put this small town Illinois girl way out of her comfort zone, but I did it. And I met a lot of really fantastic people. And now I know some names that I can call out to if I need some help. So be bold, get comfortable being uncomfortable, and know your why, because that's what is going to make people remember you.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowing your why is definitely something that I also lean in on, trying to be bold and share that. Thank you for sharing. Mary and Carolyn, do you have anything you'd like to add on navigating a male-dominated industry and how to encourage women to run for office?
In one way, it's the same thing, but then be sure you can always answer the question, why am I doing this? Why am I running? If you can't answer the question, why am I running for office, you shouldn't run, because you're not where you need to be in getting this done, and you're not going to get people to listen to you, because you've got to be able to say, this is why I'm doing this. It doesn't have to stake out a position or whatever, but you need to know why. This is my why. Why am I doing this?
And I would say that we cannot see men as enemies or hindrances. They are part of the process. Some of my best mentors, biggest sponsors have been men. So don't assume that just because it's a male, they are against whatever it is that you're interested in, and don't assume that they don't want to see a strong, articulate woman in office, because frankly, many men I know figure a woman can't screw it up any worse than they have. So, why not? We really have to be Catholic with a small c in our relationships, and reach out to everyone, whether they voted for us or not, whether they support our position or not, whether they want us in the room or not. It's incumbent on us to make those overtures.
It is, and to be very comfortable in the fact that we have a role to play and we belong in that room.
Absolutely.
We belong at that table, we belong at that room, we have a role to play.
I remember when I was first starting out in public service, I maybe weighed 90 pounds soaking wet and looked very young. And I had to convince mayors of cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and other big cities in California that they should listen to what I had to say. And the only way you do that is to walk in like you own the place.
Exactly.
Because if you are timid and don't really speak from the strength of your convictions, politicians, and I think whether they're male or female, smell blood in the water, and you are dead if you don't have that strength of your convictions. You're going to take some lumps, and you got to be able to roll with the punches.
Because you're going to take lumps anyway.
Absolutely.
So you need to be ready to say, this is how I react to that. I don't step back. I am prepared. I'm as talented and articulate as anybody else in the room, and I'm ready to reach out and make my point. And I would say that requires practice. You know, my first life as a musician, I learned to value practice. And I think that this sharing your issues and being able to articulate what you think and how you want to move ahead, sometimes it's good to practice that. Even just kind of muttering to yourself around the house or whatever, but get those phrases and words in your mind so they feel like they're flowing right from your heart.
Couple of things. One, I would like to speak to the value of the education that I received, both growing up in Waterloo and at the University of Iowa. I think that, one, as an Iowan, we tend to undersell ourselves because we're taught that it isn't good to be a braggart. But I am pretty arrogant about the quality of education I got. And the longer I'm away from the university in particular, the more I appreciate the fact that what they taught me was how to think and how to question assumptions and ask the question after the question. That has stood me in really good stead. The other thing was, I think Iowa taught me how to write. And if you're trying to convince someone of anything, usually, even if you have a face-to-face conversation, you need to follow it up with a written note. And you have to know how to be succinct to get your point across. And that's something that I really prize, having learned as a schoolgirl in Waterloo and as a student at Iowa.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to echo that. The education at Iowa, I have a journalism and political science majors when I graduated, and I work in the nonprofit industry, so I'm not really in any of those direct fields, but learning how to speak and negotiate from the political side and write from the journalism side has really assisted in my growth professionally and personally. And I attribute that to Iowa all the way. Thank you for sharing that. Mary, just switching gears a little here, you recently co-authored a book with your daughter, and it was about balancing family and career. We'd love to know what advice you would share on how to navigate a male-dominated industry such as the political world as both a woman and a mother, which I know you've already kind of commented on the woman part, but if we could shine some light on motherhood and navigating a male-dominated world,
It's
or not world, industry.
It was I have to say, one of the most fun things I've done, because I learned so much from my daughter. She spent a good deal of her life proving that blondes have more fun and is quite good at it. It's really nice. But and she is also an Iowa graduate, as my other family members are. We wrote the book because it is, we both believe, very different experiences from the two generations. And that's what started us talking about this book. So then I had a 60-year marriage and raised two kids, and it was pretty straight up Iowa. If you know, we're fairly traditional people, or at least appearances would suggest that, but in fact we're not. Because we talk about, so what were the keys, what were the jewels of things that helped us to have a functioning family, but not only that, to give the platform that launched us as young men and women, that launched our kids. How did that happen? And how can we replicate that? And it's interesting to me that the first thing she thinks is a structure is hospitality, which meant we were able to entertain anybody and everybody at our table. Early in my career, I was in the retail business, and all the young people, first job out of college, and they couldn't go home for Thanksgiving because all hands on deck the day after. And so our Thanksgiving table just grew exponentially over the years. when we were in Barbados serving, we had the Marines with us always. So it's just a matter of our table was able to grow. But the important thing was it gave us the foundation over food and drink to be able to talk about anything and everything to everybody. And so one of the structures that we think is important is hospitality.
It's funny you should say that. My goddaughter served as the staff director for Claire McCaskill when she was the ranking member of the Senate Government Oversight Committee, and her tenure, she would always bring, if there was going to be a contentious meeting, she would bring cookies or muffins or something that she had made. She wouldn't stop and buy them. She would make them, and it always changed the tenor in the room as soon as they were put in the middle of the table.
Yes, it is somehow sharing those bites and knowing that somebody cared enough to put them together is quite, it is really, it brings the walls down pretty well.
It does. Absolutely.
I love that imagery of adding more chairs to the table and really having that hospitality to have those conversations.
Yes. Plus it helps if you can talk to, informally at your own table over dinner or whatever. It's so much easier to articulate those same ideas in a maybe a more difficult or a more contentious situation. You've had the opportunity to practice, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, heading into our third section here before we open it up to the Q&A portion of tonight's panel discussion, we really want to lean in on how to support each other. So my first question is to Carolyn. Can you tell us about your journey as an author and what brought you and your co-authors of The Energy Within Us together?
One of the recommendations I would make to anyone who wants to be in the political world is to join an organization about which you feel passionately, and that can help you communicate the concerns or even solutions that you have. For me, the first organization was the American Association of Blacks in Energy, which was founded during the height of the energy crisis in the 70s because some energy lobbyists in Washington, D.C. noticed that there was no one around the table who looked like the Black or brown community. And if you're not at the table, as they say, either you're on the table or you're on the menu. And as a young energy professional, all five of us met through ABE. Two of the other women and I have known each other for probably 30 plus years. One of the women had gone the same route as you, Mary. She was an elected official. She was head of the Nevada Public Utilities Commission, et cetera. And she happened to, I happened to serve with her on a transition team for the first Obama administration and got her involved in ABE. And then the final person was the baby of the group. Her, again, making sure that you have relationships with men and women. The senior vice president at her company, who was on the board of ABE with the other women and I, brought her to a national conference, and I convinced her to take a leadership role in her region, and it just mushroomed from there. We decided that because the Black community tends to be and have an oral tradition, it means that lessons don't necessarily get transferred from one generation to another. And so we decided we wanted to write down our experiences so that our sons and daughters and the sons and daughters of other people could learn from some of our mistakes, and they wouldn't have to repeat the same mistakes twice. We also, though, wanted to give back to our community. So we decided that we would write this book, we would make it the subject of discussions about becoming a leader, whether it's in the energy industry or any industry. But we also would help train the next generation of leaders. So all of the proceeds of our book go to the ABE Scholarship Fund to fund scholarships for Black women majoring in a STEM field.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that journey.
And that just was one comment. A lot of people seem to be rather cynical about women, and they say women can't get along, they're catty, yada, yada, yada. That's just not true.
Right.
And in fact, we were close friends anyway, and we'd always get together over a bottle of wine or a dinner or whatever. We made sure we took the time to spend time with each other at board meetings. But in writing our journeys, we learned so much about each other and have become even closer because of that experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'll throw this out to all the panelists to wrap up our final question in this section. What does mentorship, fellowship, or sponsorship mean to you all? And just elaborate more on that, supporting each other, leaning into each other. Megan, do you want to chime in first?
Sure. I like the saying that the ship rises together. And that's sort of what I feel summarizes mentorship, fellowship, and sponsorship. If we want to grow as a society, we bring each other up with us, right? No matter where we're at. So I feel really blessed. I had so many really great mentors in my life that I aim to be that for other people. And I aim to be a sponsor for other people as they were to me. You don't know what you don't know. And that's the beauty of having a mentor to provide that knowledge to you, and fellowships provide you the experience that you don't have and that you don't know that you don't have. So like I said, the ship rises together, and that's my philosophy on those.
As I mentioned earlier, the two women who came to my door on a Saturday morning to encourage me to run for the Iowa Senate, as our conversation went on, they both said they would stay with me through the campaign. They would build a plan. They would tell me how to do it. They would help me raise the money. And they did. And to me, that was the whole thing that allowed me to say yes, because I knew nothing. And so, as you say, it's sort of conscious incompetence. I kind of knew what I didn't know, but how to find out, I don't know about that. I would say mentorship for me is engaged in trying to find out what the person I'm working with is most interested in. Where can I be most helpful? And that it often is not what I expect it to be. And so, but I love it. Mentor coaching, all of that today is still one of my very favorite things to do with men and women. And, but I always start by encouraging them to think, what's your vision of the desired future? What is your own vision for the desired future? Because if you don't have one, I'm probably not going to be very helpful. And
Right.
so help me to know where you're headed, and then I can perhaps ask the right questions to get you there.
I see mentorship and networking and fellowship basically being the same thing. It's
Yes.
getting out there, being available to other people, making yourself available to other people, and bringing them into your circle. Mentorship is helping someone understand the rules of engagement, whether it's in your workplace or, as Mary said, just understanding the ins and outs of the political world or of an issue. Sponsor, and you have a relationship, you have a direct relationship with a mentor. And you may ask someone to mentor you, or someone may decide to take it upon themselves to mentor you. A sponsor, though, is the person who puts their political or professional capital on the line to advocate for you, even when you're not in the room. So you may or may not ever know that you have a sponsor, but without a sponsor, you usually don't get into the upper echelons of an organization or a movement. So with Mary, she had sponsors who helped her get elected to the Senate. For me, I've had sponsors who've helped me rise through the business community and through through public service. With Megan, it's a sponsor who nominated her for the fellowship. So I mean, it usually doesn't happen without those sponsors. Nobody does anything on their own, totally on their own.
Yes, and it's one of the things there that is important, that you have a fairly diverse group at the table.
Absolutely.
I have learned over the years, so many times I have been the first and only woman at a table, an executive table, or, you know, I won't not say how old I am, but I've had a number of decades of experience, and the difference of me being at a table of all men in terms of sponsorship is huge, because we tend to nominate or support or think of people that look like us and talk like us, and we perhaps don't mean to be exclusive, but we turn out that way. And so when there's somebody else there to introduce a little different component, voice, or whatever, it really changes the discussion. But you have to be brave enough to talk about it, to step forward. It isn't any good to be at the table if you don't participate and engage.
And expand the table.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for sharing, and thank you all for this amazing, inspiring conversation. I'm truly in awe of all the amazing things you've done and the motivation you provided us this evening. I would now like to turn the floor over to Larissa Bungo and Kate Garrett, who will begin to ask our panelists the questions we've been collecting over the evening. Thank you all again.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Hi, everyone. Our first question to the group is, as an elected official, how do you balance your opinions with representing the majority interests of your representative area?
I think I'm going to start, since I'm the elected official. I have never quite thought of what is the majority interest. I think I get off in a place that is not going to be helpful. My goal was always like, find a piece of common ground and then try to find somebody that will stand there with you, and then enlarge it a little bit, find somebody else, until you just keep enlarging that and finding people who will stand on that piece of ground with you. Sometimes you've got to alter your position a little bit, or tweak it, or the policy, or whatever. But the important thing in an election official is to get stuff passed.
Exactly.
And so you've got to find a way to bring enough votes on your piece of common ground to get the thing passed. I can remember as a Senate president, one time I had to get the budget passed, and I had a really contentious gentleman. I called him in to my office and said, "What will it take for you to shut up on this bill?" You know, what can I trade with you? Because I need you to be quiet so I can get this bill passed. And so we negotiated what that would be. But it's about finding common ground. It's about building a policy that welcomes enough people to get the job done.
Thank you, Mary. Moving to the next question. Not everyone has the right mix of time and qualities to be an elected politician or high-level policy person. What are other ways to be involved in the community to influence politics and policy?
I can jump in on this one.
Great.
I was, up until just recently, an appointed official for the city of North Liberty. I was the Parks and Recreation chairwoman for the last 3.5 years. So there are ways to be in the political realm and not actually run in an election. You can be an appointed official, which I wouldn't say maybe has quite the same effect as an elected official, but you have a voice and you have a platform in the same format as an elected official. We serve with the city and we provide opinions, provide opportunities to air concerns and bring new ideas to the table. You never need to be elected or appointed in any format to have an effect on policy. You can run different sorts of petitions. You can write letters. You can be bold and reach out to your local elected politicians or any lobbyists that you know who are working on any particular bill that you're passionate about. Just making your voice known in general goes a long way. Carolyn, you have anything to add?
I can't agree more with you, Megan. I guess a couple of things. One, being part of your neighborhood watch is important for affecting what goes on in your community. That old canard about all politics is local is true. And ultimately, the interest is in what happens on your block, in your neighborhood, in your community. When I was working on air quality legislation, for example, and opposing some of the people in my industry, I was able to tell them that you're a big company and you have X number of thousands of employees, but a politician is always going to listen to a small business owner or a resident because there are so many more of them. All they need to do is speak up. Politicians always value letters and comments from real citizens as opposed to lobbyists or a form letter. So just if you feel strongly about something, write a letter in your words on your own paper and send it to your elected official. They are going to pay attention to it.
And remember that elected officials really, if they're going to do their job properly, need to be well informed about all sides of the issue.
Absolutely.
One side is just not going to do it. So your feeling, your opinion, your issue has weight, and you need to feel free, even urgent, to share that.
And no longer being an Iowan, I must say that I think the Iowa caucus process, contrary to what all of the naysayers say, I think that is some of the most authentic democracy you can find, because it's neighbors talking to neighbors about who they support and why. It's the most meaningful experience I've ever had in electoral politics. So obviously, the thing you need to do is vote and get out and go to your caucus meetings, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Make sure that you're participating in that process.
One of my favorite things in politics altogether is to chair a caucus,
Oh, yeah.
because you have no idea who's going to come and what their issues are and who they want to support and who they want to nominate. And in Iowa, retail politics most often, I have rarely had a rude person that doesn't allow everybody to speak, to get their opinion out there in front of people. And some people bring their children and encourage them to share.
Oh, yeah.
I had a little boy that said to me, "Did you know that if turtles eat styrofoam, they have to float?" The whole rest of the place applauded. That little
is
boy
so
made
cute.
a statement, and he had something to say. It was just wonderful.
Well, thank you, ladies, for that. I too love a good caucus, so I'm glad to be in good company here. I think that this particular lens of conversation leads to one of our next conversations, kind of about confidence and self-efficacy in this process. So Caitlin asked, how do you overcome that feeling of discounting yourself if you don't know something or aren't sure of your own abilities? Similar to something Mary briefly touched on in her own career at the beginning of her political career. It can be such a limiting feeling. So I'm curious if you have any techniques or advice for overcoming it. And I think this is open to anyone who'd like to share.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen. I was just interviewed by the publication that we call here in Des Moines, Fearless. And the question was to me, how do you define fearless? What is fearless to you? And I said, it doesn't mean that I'm not afraid.
That's right.
It means that I can move ahead anyway. And I start with something just basic, like go into a room of people you don't know and start introducing yourself.
Yep.
And that's a very basic way to learn to face people, because the next time you do that, you'll be able to move beyond introducing yourself and share something that you want to say or whatever. So yeah, you have to figure out ways to put yourself out there. And so it's going to be fearful, depending on your age and experience, but it'll always be fearful unless you take that first step and figure out, I can work through the fear.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I'm going to repeat what I said something before is, if you know your why, your reason for doing it, it doesn't matter how you're going to get from point A to point B. You just know that that's something you're passionate about, and your passion is going to be one of the things that drives you through. That's a huge part of getting the confidence to do it.
That's a good
Absolutely.
question. Know your why. Very good.
Thanks, ladies. Another question that we have, we're kind of entering a season where folks are loving to get something new on the Kindle or a new book to read. What are you reading right now? What's inspiring you? What are you listening to? What's going on in your worlds?
Well, funny you should ask that. I have been working with a friend, helping her. I've been doing proofreading and then helping her write a study guide. This is a book that was just released in July on the first 5 Black women diocesan bishops in the American Episcopal Church. And it has been just a joy, and it's a short book. It's not very long. It's based on 6 conversations that she had with the 5 bishops last year, so during 2020. And so it goes in, talks about the dual pandemic of COVID and the racial unrest, and how they had to lead through that and what their feelings were. It's just a wonderful, wonderful book. And the study guide will be released a little bit later this month for people who want to go into more depth in thinking about what is said in the book. But it's called This Band of Sisterhood.
I'm reading a book called Nomad Land, and I live in an independent retirement community now, and I'm one of and among many seniors who are fortunate in our lifestyle and our ability to live here and enjoy this. But this is about seniors who are not so fortunate and what they're doing to try to survive and thrive, even though they probably still need to have a job. And the job might be physically demanding or it is a humbling experience, but I'm going to finish it because I think it's something we need to talk about. I haven't formed I'm not articulating well, but it's very, for me, it's so far very impactful. So I have to think about where I'm going with that.
Mhm. Currently, I am in the middle of an Anne Rule book marathon for all of you true crime lovers who know who that is. That's what I'm working on, but maybe something a little more appropriate for this conversation. I'm catching up on a podcast by a woman who I met out in DC. The podcast is called She Said by Laura Cox Kaplan. It's a super fantastic podcast for anybody interested. It's Laura Cox Kaplan is a professional out in DC who interviews women from different walks of life. And this session or season is all about influence, how you can gain influence, how you show your influence. She's incredible. I highly recommend listening to it.
Well, I want that job.
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
Sounds like y'all are reading and listening to some really, really great stuff. When I hope everyone's taking notes on the things that are happening. One more question that we have is kind of about navigating that service and community building that y'all mentioned in this current climate. And in a world where we're all on Zoom right now and often in hybrid scenarios, what have been some things that y'all have done to navigate that space?
Well, I like that space. It's to me, it's many of my boards are you can go or not go now, or Zoom or not Zoom or whatever. And I'm hungry to see people in person. But throughout this pandemic and this be careful and whatever, I found it was easy for me to participate and to overcome like right now, I feel like I could talk to any of my panelists here and feel like I'm talking to them. And at the end of the time, I'll be acquainted with them. And I didn't start that way with it. It felt sort of distanced, but if I don't have to get in my car and go someplace, I'm eager to attend stuff. Yes, I'll attend.
Mm-hmm.
I do get Zoom overload after a while. And frankly, one of the things I'll do is just stop the video. I'll continue listening. But if I'm just overwhelmed, but have to be there, I'll just turn on mute and click on stop video so that I can take a breather and then come back. Zoom actually, like Mary, I think has been good for me. I don't have to be on a plane every week. I've been traveling about 150,000 miles a year since I can remember. So this has been really nice, not traveling. And it's, my husband and I joke, it's the longest time we have spent together, even though we've been married, almost 40 years. We have never spent this amount of unbroken time together. And neither of us has been killed or maimed. And we find that we actually still enjoy each other's company. So that's definitely been a positive.
Yeah, it's certainly been a blessing and a curse to have the ability to say yes to everything. And I'm the kind of person who wants to say yes to everything, which then leads to emotional fatigue.
Yes.
So it's taught me, while I get to say yes to being around people and meeting new people such as all of you, it's also enabled me to learn how to say no to a lot of things. As silly as that seems, Zoom's allowed me to take back a lot of my personal time instead of having to drive myself to meetings. I don't know if all of you have heard of Kiwanis, but I happen to be in a Kiwanis club with people who are at least 5 decades older than me, and we meet at 6:30 in the morning on Thursdays. And if I don't have to get up out of bed and drive to
She froze.
I think we might have lost her. But Larissa, I think you had one more question.
We do. Just one last question, ladies. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Would you close us out letting us know what has been most rewarding to you about your career in politics? Who would like to go?
Well,
For
sure,
me?
I have
Go
two
ahead.
things.
Sure.
Two things. One is quite a small thing, but it is the safe space law that allows a woman in lieu of an abortion to leave a baby at a hospital or a health facility or even a fire station for that long and not be punished for child neglect or whatever. It's an anonymous thing, and you will see, at least in Iowa, safe place signs, many public spaces. And that little thing has just meant a lot to me. And it grew out of a 13-year-old girl who, well, it's a really awful story, but it grew out of an awful story involving a 13-year-old girl who did not understand she was having a baby. Just, it was awful. So that's an important thing to me. The other thing that's important, and I won't list them, is the number of things I stopped from happening. Put the brakes on. We don't need that.
Thank you.
I had something I referred to as the Kevorkian drawer, where things went to die.
Thank you, Mary. Carolyn or Megan?
Well, I would say the most rewarding thing for me has just been helping others to get involved. Not necessarily seeing anything directly that I've been able to do come to fruition, like what you're talking about, Mary, which is fantastic. I really draw a lot of my passion from helping others get to the place where they feel like they can do something more and get involved.
Good.
So
Yes.
that's where I find my joy in it.
Great. Carolyn?
I think, like Mary, feeling that the issues that I'm working on make a difference in people's lives,
Yeah.
has been so rewarding. Even if I've only had a small part to play, that's a necessary piece of the puzzle. And then the other thing is being able to expand the table and being able to bring other women and other people of color into the conversation.
Yes. That's critical. Thank you. I should have mentioned that as well.
Well, thank you, ladies, for joining our table tonight and sharing your wisdom and your experiences. with our community. Carolyn, Mary, and Megan, we are just so grateful for your time and for what you've shared tonight. And I think everyone on this call can find something that they've learned or a good takeaway. So we appreciate that as we move forward and as we build this community of alumni.
Can I say
yes.
one last thing? And
Yes.
that is, don't assume that because you don't have a degree in political science, or you're not an attorney, or you're not an engineer, or you're not this or that, that you don't have a conversation to make, a contribution to make. One of the things that I feel really good about is having a solid liberal arts education from Iowa. I was a music major, and then I went to grad school. Yes. And I went to grad school in urban planning, but I've worked in engineering organizations my entire career. You can do it. Don't sell yourself short.
Right. When there's a contest for relevancy of undergraduate degrees, I often win because mine's in piano performance.
Mine is woodwind performance, so we should get together.
We should. I could accompany you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again, ladies. I work with undergraduate students, and I'll have to share that with them, that you truly can do anything with any degree, which is wonderful.
Absolutely.
Well, again, we would like to thank you for your time. Thank you for the folks on the call who've joined us in this wonderful conversation. Thank you to Kristen for planning. We just appreciate all the hard work that went into this. If you're interested in learning more about our organization, we would encourage you to check out our website. You can also find information on Facebook and LinkedIn, and we'd love to have you all continue the conversation there as we continue through this evening in this process. So thank you so much for joining us, and that is everything for the night. So thank you, ladies. Have a great night.
Thanks.
And go
Thank you.
Hawks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.